You're gonna play now?
Yes.
What?
Yeah, play first. Play the game first. Start with the game.
Okay.
Wake you up in the morning. Most of you got laptops up, so it shouldn't take you long to get there. In fact, all of the students have a laptop up. Yes, I remember the days when we had to provide computers to students because they didn't have their own. But, okay, we got through it. Okay, so I gave you 2 papers this week, or rather, yesterday morning. There was a longer one and a shorter one. These were both in the same topic area, right? So I thought it might be nice because previously I've looked at giving out papers that were quite different because to give an overview of games for health. In this case, I've given you out 2 papers that are working in very much the same area, but take very different approaches, right? So I thought it would be interesting to discuss the different approaches and look at the kind of the approach to doing research, right? An approach to games for health within those 2. So we're going to start with a Kahoot, but we also have I have a lecture to just discuss games for health first, and then we'll go into the analysis of the 2 papers. Okay. So those who haven't read the longer paper, most of the questions come from that one because it's much longer. So good people who have read both papers will score well if you've read both papers. Otherwise, we're going to take what? Otherwise, there's going to be some fairly low scoring. Okay, so
One more is coming.
One more. Hover over. I saw. Is he going over the door?
Mm-hmm.
Is he coming back? Has he joined in? No. I thought he just walked past. Is he hanging around the door waiting to come in? Okay, well, he's just going to be late then. Okay, so, you guys ready? 7 questions, so not a long one. Okay. The Targeting Parents for Childhood Weight Management paper focuses on parents because they have A, money, B, time, 3, phones, or 4, influence. Influence. You're all right. So you all read enough of it. Or you just worked out that was the only one that I would have used. Right? So apparently that you all got that one right. That's nice. Excellent. Okay, so I then shortened it because I didn't want to. So that paper, evidence-based apps are more, less, or equally popular as others. So are evidence-based health apps more or less or equally popular? Less popular. Most of you got yeah. So one of the interesting things they found is when they analysed the App Store, they found that games that used behavioural change evidence-based approaches were the least popular health
The most boring ones.
boring ones written by, boring academics who are just focused on, oh, if I tick all my behavioural change numbers, I'll get a nice numbered boxy kind of, yeah. There could be some problems with having a too rigid theoretical approach. The percentage of apps that are downloaded and only used once, according to the paper, 5%, 15%, 25%, 50%. You guys are doing pretty well for people who said they didn't read the paper.
You're guessing.
They're doing very well at guessing. What? Ruining what? Ruining the paper? Am I doing spoilers for the paper? 25%? Yeah, okay, so it's up to 15. It was 25%. So basically what they're saying is that for a quarter of the apps people make, you put a huge amount of effort in, people see it once again. Just remove it. It's very common for people to look at things once. What is a behavioural change technique? An active ingredient, a model, an action, or a plan. This is probably the trickiest one. It's the most detailed of the questions. And you had to kind of be paying attention when they were talking about the behavioral change techniques to, yes, they called it an active ingredient. And I read that and went, weird to call the behavioral change technique an active ingredient. So I'm glad I fooled you all. This one indicates that you weren't reading the paper really closely. But
it was a bit hard to pay attention all the time on the.
to get all the way through, yeah, it was a longish paper. Though not, you can get much longer, right? So we had like 40-page papers in the past. So this was not actually remarkably long. There were a few diagrams and things, but it wasn't a scarily long paper compared to what we get. Which types of messages are used in the TPCWM paper? Short messages, gain frame, lose frame, or pop-up messages? Did you get to that part of the paper?
I didn't. To guess.
Okay, so in their design approach, somebody guessed right. What they found is that when you give health messages, right, they talk about two types of health messages: loss frame and gain frame. Gain frame of it saying things like, "Hey, you're getting healthier. You're awesome. You're going to lose weight. That's great. You're doing well." And loss frames are, "You're going to get cancer. You're going to get fat. This will give you diarrhea." So when you're giving messages out in your app, they find that gain frame are more effective at encouraging people than, and motivation than lose frame, right? But I'm glad Short was picked by all those people who hadn't read the paper. So BR, yeah, you actually read it, did you? Yeah. So you read stuff, you get a long way. Time to eat calculated players' performance by using image processing, semantic analysis, human grading, or mechanical Turk. Have you guys heard of the mechanical Turk?
Yep, we've heard.
You've heard it.
Yes, here.
Human grading, right? This was
The bad thing.
unscalable, right? What they did in there, if you sent pictures to human beings who would view every picture, right? And see the response. You can't have a game app that relies on humans to be the back end, right? The mechanical Turk, just for the have you explained it? You haven't explained it in class.
No.
Good. Mechanical Turk is an Amazon service, and what they do is they do basically this thing, but you put up a human intelligence task, and then somewhere in the world there are a bunch of poor people who have computers who will do that task, and then you pay them a pittance, right? So you pay them like 10 cents to enter all your data from your scanned receipts or things, right? And so it tries to distribute tasks to an audience of people who are sitting at computers not doing anything and want to earn, American dollars in their home country in Bangladesh or whatever, right? So it's an interesting model, but yeah, they could do it that way, but it would be very expensive app. Okay, last one. How many messages did students send on the SMS before they blocked it? Was it 50 messages, 200 messages, 400 messages, or 800 messages before they initially were going to have the interaction done by SMS? And they found that if you give a bunch of students free iPhones and free SMSs, they start SMSing each other. They start messaging each other. And I found it humorous that after the 800, they had an exclamation point, as if that was a lot in 2 days, that you could have sent 800 SMSs in 2 days. Well, I know people who regularly send 800 messages and SMSs in 2 days, right? It's only 400 a day, right? You've got,
If it's free.
if it's free, and you've got, how long does it take to write an SMS? Less than a minute, 30 seconds, 20 seconds? You say, oh, yeah. And okay, ding, K, ding. And if you talk of these if you're thinking of these as speech acts, right? If you're talking to someone, you could say that these were a speech act. How many times do you say something in a day? A lot more dangerous. Huh? So if you're sitting there chatting to someone and going bing, 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 yeah. So.
But there must be a person who responds, and this person has to pay.
No, because they gave 50 kids free iPhones in a classroom. Everyone in the class started sending SMSs to each other. And so you might be having a conversation with 5 or 6 people in the class, and they're only having one conversation, but you're having 5, and so you're going constantly tapping out. Okay, so the games for house. So we can actually go back and we'll see how the results go for this. So that was the last question. Woohoo! Well done. It looks like you're the only one who got all 6 right. Well, 6 out of 7 right. So yes, 6 out of 7 right. Well done. One of them was pretty hard. Yeah. So well done. Good work for reading the paper. Thank you. It means you're going to have to be involved in the discussion quite a bit. Now, so you guys don't have to worry about that. We can. We're not really going to be rating it as something that other people will do. I'm assuming. But I'll go back to the presentation. Right. So we're talking games about. Those 2 papers were both tackling childhood obesity. They attacked it in various different ways, and they presented 2 similar theoretical models. Right. So the time to eat used Fogg's behavior equals motivation, ability, and trigger. And the targeting parents paper used their COM-B, which, as far as I can tell, is the same. But if we go bring that discussion up, this idea of using games to be healthy is an old idea, right? Often sports are seen as ways of becoming physically active. Right? There are a lot of parents who treat football as, oh, it gets them out of the house, it gets them up out in front of the TV, right? So it's a game that promotes physical health just by making you be active, right? So, and the ancient Olympics were a game for military training, right? Because, they wanted to have good spear throwers and good runners, and so they made games out of that so that you didn't actually have to train by killing people, right? This would be somewhat costly for an army to only train with actual deaths. The modern Olympics is their vision statement is around social change, right? So we can have a debate over whether or not you consider the Olympics a serious game or not, right? Because is it the gamification of sport? Right, where you have a leaderboard because you have a medal leaderboard. So you could say people are playing those sports, and then we gamify that by adding a medal table to all the countries, right? So you can kind of think of that makes it easier for them to see. So you can think of the Olympics as a kind of gamification, or is it a serious game? Are there some games that are only played because they're played at the Olympics? If it is a gamification, who is it for? Who is playing the game of the Olympics? Who do you think are playing the game? Is it the participants who actually, do the running and do the jumping?
So when you have the Olympics games at the end, what is the leaderboard? What is the scoring board usually?
Yeah, and who are being placed? Yes.
The best.
Yeah, but in the
Olympics.
In the Olympics as a whole, not in the individual sports.
So in countries.
Exactly.
So countries are on the leaderboard, and so countries earn points by having their competitors win gold, silver, and bronze medals. So you as an individual athlete, you get ranked in your own sport, but then the countries are being ranked against each other. And some of the actions the countries take in this game is to fund sports institutes and to selectively choose which sports they're going to fund, right? How they spend their resources to try and maximize their points in the game that is the Olympics. Right? So you can kind of think of that as a way that the Olympics is gamifying spending on on sporting activities by saying, well, if you spend it here, you're going to get a gold medal, so you're going to end up higher on the points list. And some governments have adopted the game almost more than the sports, right? They're kind of doing the, oh, you got lots of medals, right? We want to get more of those, so we're going to give you money because you're successful and we want more of those points and appear higher on the list. Or they say, no one's really spending money in that area. We think if we spend money in that area, we might be able to get the gold medals. So they can target different areas. And so you can think of it as a game that's manipulating behavior. And in a sense, a game for health, because some of the justification people use for this is that, if you have active sports, people will get out and be more physically active, and this will make people healthier. So we have taken out poetry out of the Olympics, because poetry was in the Olympics, in the modern Olympics. You could actually get gold medals in poetry, which isn't so much physically active. So quite different at that point.
I think in Norway, chess is considered a sport. So.
Chess is considered a sport. It's kind of, it's not really a physical. You could just use voice activation. Green pawn. So you could get around being even slightly active.
Yeah, a friend was telling me there is a new discipline which is playing chess and mixed with the boxing ring. So you play a chess game with the opponent, and then you go to a boxing ring and you actually box. Right. You get points for both activities, and then the winner wins. Right, so.
Right. I think the drinking chess is the one. Every time you take a piece, every piece is a shot glass, right? So all the pawns are different shot glasses. Every time you take one of their pieces, you have to take a shot, which means as you're better, you get more drunk. So it's a kind of auto leveler. Try and keep the person who's winning down. And I did play shot checkers. I was given the checkers board with shot glasses, and I did play. They had Aftershock, the cinnamon liqueur, which was in their one, so I was drinking that, and he was drinking beer, and he won. I couldn't keep up. I was winning initially. So types of health. So games for health. Health is a massive area, right? And anytime you start putting your toe in the water of affecting people's health, there are a whole bunch of regulations and study and discipline that comes in. So we can look at the different types of health. So we can divide those into kind of physical, mental, and social health. This one, not as many people talk about, right? Particularly in here where you talk about sexual health, right? Because sex is kind of, people don't talk about it that much openly. And particularly hard is in this area where you're talking about sex in the elderly, right? So people over the age of 70 having sex in rest homes. That's a really critical issue for them, right? It's one of the big challenges they have is the emotional challenges around that social interactions, because they've often lost their partner, they're not sure how to form new relationships, but they have this deep grieving for that relationship, right? So that's a relationship health issue. Of course, you've got standard medical health, physical health, and mental health, both sort of cognitive and psychological. And I make those distinctions because I think of cognitive health is just your kind of actual physical ability to calculate things, right? So if you get brain damage, you lose cognitive health. Psychological mental health is more, if you're depressed, right? If you're having, schizophrenia might come under cognitive health in some situations where it's kind of a chemical thing, but phobias would come under psychological health, right? So you can kind of, these are different areas. One's much more kind of physiological, and one's more psychosocial.
The interesting thing, though, is that even though you break it down, there's a strong interplay between all of them. So.
There's really interesting, massive interplay between physical health and mental health, right? If you
social depression,
yep, and they all go wham, and so although you can talk about them as being separate areas, they will influence each other.
Because they tend to be one human being with all those parts.
Yeah. I remember my grandmother was always a bit grumpy. Right, and we just thought, she's a grumpy old woman. And then she had both her knees replaced, and she became pleasant and nice. It's just she'd been in pain constantly, which had made her grumpy. So her mental health was being affected by her physical pain. And And she had forgotten how much pain she was in. So yeah, it's that we're one human being. You can look, so first you can think of what health area are you affecting, what kind of part of the system. Now it's a system, so each part interacts with other bits. You can look at the objective of your intervention, right? So why are we intervening? What are we trying to achieve? And if you look at, there's a kind of prevention and treatment model, right? So prevention, you try and do something before things happen, and treatment, after it happens, you try and treat the result. Prevention is broken down into primary, secondary, and tertiary. So when you're making a game for health, right? If you're going to try and prevent something or try and kind of influence a system, you can either be trying to do prevention or be trying to treat somebody who's had something happen. Primary prevention, so you can use various analogies for this, but one is primary prevention is where you try and stop anything happening at all, right? So immunization is a primary prevention because it tries to stop you getting sick at all, right? In New Zealand, we talk of this. This is sunscreen and wearing hats and staying inside between 10 and 2. So we don't let kids play outside because the sun will kill them. Right? But that's prevention. Right? So an early stage. Secondary, and this is, I think, where something's happened, but you're trying to prevent the serious consequences of it. Right? So if you get sick, a secondary prevention measure would say, I'm going to stay home and rest so I don't push myself and get even more sick, right? Or I'm going to, if you're worried about, for older people getting pneumonia, you get sick, you get pneumonia. As soon as you start getting sick, you start taking the preventative medicine that prevents you getting pneumonia, right? It didn't stop you getting sick, but it prevents it getting worse, right? So this is that's called a secondary prevention. And the tertiary prevention is where you try and prevent the thing that has happened affecting the rest of your life. Right? So rather than treating the thing, which is over that side, this is preventing. So if you have cancer, or if you have a workplace, if you have an accident, right, and you lose a limb, a tertiary prevention could be a way of modifying your work environment so you can still work. Right? So it's preventing loss of your work because of your illness. Right? It's kind of completely separate from actually treating the illness itself. It's kind of preventing other consequences. Right? So they talk about these primary, secondary, and tertiary. They suggest that the best way is to try and come in here and stop things happening at all. Right? That's the best place to interact. So that's preventing health issues. Most games for health sit in this primary prevention. They try and, these ones are about trying to stop you gaining weight, right? So they're trying to prevent you getting diabetes by losing weight early. Secondary one, you get a few of these. These are the secondary ones here are often games around having diabetes or epilepsy, or you've got something and you're trying to manage it, right? So they're kind of, if you've got diabetes, you're trying to manage your insulin levels, right? So you have games for that. For treatment, you can have both chronic and acute. You know the difference between those? You know those words? Vaguely? So chronic are those long-term things, right? So diabetes is chronic, right? It doesn't just come and then gone again. Acute things are things that are happening right now and they're significant and they will change. Now, games that go into here and treat acute things means that you can use a lot of your behavioral change models which don't affect long-term behavior. Because if you're affecting a long-term behavior, you have to stick with that person through the rest of their life, right? Whereas if you're doing something, measuring something that's acute or treating something that's an acute thing, say a kid has breaks their arm very badly and they need to rehabilitate their shoulder because they're in a cast for 6 months, that rehabilitation is for an acute problem because it's happening right. It's happening now, and once they've got their arm better, it'll go away. Right? So you can make games, and games work very well in this area and kind of in this area. The rest start being a bit tricky. Right? So understanding where your game fits. Now, Bruna and I have had a discussion on this, and I'm working with Ben on another application. who created this either taxonomy of serious games or market segmentation of serious games, depending on kind of which way you think of it. And the idea here is that he's taken the whole health area. So rather than breaking it down into kind of, oh, what treatment level they're looking at and what are their objectives, it's gone into, so here's preventative. So this is the kind of levels, but he's gone preventative and therapeutic, which are those first two I talked about. But then he's also gone into assessment, education, informatics, so data analysis. So you get people to play games just so you can learn more about them. And production, where you're actually producing health data out of playing games. And then whether you're talking about individuals, are you talking about professionals like doctors and nurses? Are you talking about academics and researchers? Or are you talking about the general public? Right? So it kind of breaks that down. And then says, okay, what are you doing in each of these areas? Right? What are the and here personal education training is an act for first aid. Because you're training people how to learn to do first aid. It's an individual you're training. Preventative, so exergaming, stress, nutrition. So these two both fall into that category. So these are ways of thinking about all of the potential areas that you could work in health. Now you can also break it down on who pays, right? So some of the ones here could be being paid by the government, or being paid by an insurance company, or being paid by the individual. Right? So that's almost another dimension. Each of these you could look at who is paying for that intervention. Over the far end of public health, it's usually governments. They're the only ones who really benefit from the general population being healthier. And that's, if you're going to find a way of having a successful company, you probably should be thinking about who pays. Okay, so the idea of breaking those games and talking about treatment versus and prevention is about trying to make it easier to discuss what this game is, what games are like it, are these games similar, can we learn from one how to behave in the other. So if we're both working in kids dietary modification games, what can we learn from two papers that are in the same category? Do they share features? So you guys have certainly played games. Who's never played a game, a computer game? Good. I'm glad I've got a zero response from that. Genres of games. How do we categorize games? Badly. So, because you have games like first-person shooter games, which talks about a mechanic of the way you interact. But then you talk about horror games, which is the emotion it creates. So we go from a physical interaction, because you can have a horror first-person shooter, right? So they're not separate in any way; they're different axes. And then you have, sports games and role-playing games, and then you have MMOs, and then you have MMORPGs because it's a role-playing game, but it's also massively multiplayer. And we just create these random categories, and there are certain people who say, well, the genres we talk about in games are just the kind of organic growth of the industry that just happened to be a popular game that was like that. And so other games like that got called in that area, right? So MOBAs, the multiplayer online battle arena, right? Those came up. There was a popular League of Legends. So there was a popular game, and then it grew some equivalents, and then that became a genre, and we refer to it as a grouping, right? Even though there was no strategic decision around this. So how would you guys group games? Would you group them who they target or what they target? So if you're looking games for health, is it like what's more relevant? What they target. So if they're targeting diabetes, or if they're targeting, in this case, eating, so rather than just saying games that target 12-year-olds for maths, and games that target 12-year-olds for eating. So who isn't as important as what is for you? You guys agree? You'd think that what? So the idea here is if we were going to start analyzing all of these games we're going to look at, because we're going to look at a lot of games in this course, a lot of papers in this course. So targeting what, or thinking about what the target might be. Should we use the mechanics they use or their visual appearance? Are those relevant as a dimension to break a game down? Is it the mechanics they're using in terms of, is it a reinforcement? Are they punishing you? Is it a leaderboard and social kind of activity? Or are we talking about, cartoon style graphics versus real world graphics?
Both matter.
Both matter, right? So both might be useful in analyzing. So you might have to break down and say, okay, well, let's try to break these down another layer into mechanics and then another, and then compare across visual appearance. Is price a relevant way to divide a game? Are the premium games versus the freemium versus the free-to-play, are those different categories, and does that matter?
Well, you can't really tell anymore with the games how much they cost.
No, because they say free-to-play,
Yeah.
and then secretly they start adding in unknown expenditure. I must admit, I was a bit surprised that for some of the free-to-play games, I saw one pack that was $600 for buying coins in the game. I'm going to spend $600 in a single go to just buy a bunch of virtual currency. It's kind of, if it was Bitcoin, at least it would be worth something, or potentially worth something.
If you start going that road, then visual appearance, you will also want to have all the kind of interaction devices or sensors you use. This would, at some point, it will explode.
Yeah. So here you kind of you have to decide which categories you would use to break down, right? So in this previous diagram, they used the general area the game is in, and whether they're doing prevention, therapeutic, assessment, education. So they broke it down that way. So 2 axes, and then they fill up the whole grid. Now, you could then take more axes and start dividing it up even more. Now, the thing is, that's useful so long as there's still, to some extent, some lessons you can learn from other games that fall in your category. Right? So a categorization where you say, I'm going to categorize all games that begin with A, and I'm going to put them together. It probably can't learn much from each other, but it would be a valid categorization that was repeatable and that I could give to you guys and you'd successfully do it. Right? I just wouldn't learn much from it. Okay, so we're going to look at the papers, and I'll start this, and then we'll have a break. Seeing we've got another 10 minutes before the break. Okay, so sorry, I copied in the wrong name first, but it's actually Curtis, Lahadi, and Brown were the authors of the Targeting Parents for Childhood Weight Management, so TPCWM. I'm going to call it Targeting Parents, okay, just so I don't have to say that each time. And they did a very theory-driven approach, right? And they did this paper documents their process up to having a working prototype, an actual app that they can give out to people, and the sort of start of giving that out without actually giving the results of whether they were successful or not, but they show you the design process. These chat about their design process and kind of promote what they're doing. Right? So you can see these quite different types of papers. So they're two different. There's very much targeting the same area, right? They're targeting weight management for children. They take quite a different approach, right? So one does hey, games are cool. We like making games. What's something we could target? Oh, we could target weight management. Okay, let's make a game around weight management. Games are Tamagotchis. Tamagotchi's a kind of game. We can get kids to do something every day by making them play with a Tamagotchi. Therefore, what should we make them do? We'll make them lose weight. That's a good idea. And they kind of, that's how they come up with their idea. The other one says, right, we've got like this, we've got a problem with childhood obesity. Let's find what we can do about that, right? And they obviously didn't think about games at all when they started that process, right? In that paper, it reads to me like they went to an app developer and said, like, so they do this big design, right? They go to a software engineering company who makes apps and they say, hey, can you make us this app? And the software company goes, yeah, but no one will use it. Because, you know, that would be so boring, right? And the software company goes, but, you know, we make quite a lot of apps, right? And we know the ones that are successful actually have these engaging features. Because, you know, so you should probably add these gamification stuff because it actually makes it interesting and people might actually use the product. And so the researchers go, oh, okay. And they start looking at it, go, oh, okay, there's these things, we can line up those, and they go back and then they add kind of, oh yeah, you can do some game stuff in what we're doing. And oh, look, there is behavioral change stuff going on there. And so it kind of feels like to me that they didn't take games seriously until people working in the area saying, well, you know, our experience is you should use game stuff. They then went back and saw how that would fit. Right? So one seems to come from the games are cool, let's find an area. The other says this area needs attention. Oh, and games are quite useful for that. So quite different approaches. Different audience. Okay, multiple ways of thinking about this. So what's the most obvious different audience between the two?
Yes, the first one is targeting the parents, and the second one is targeting the children.
Right? In terms of the writing style of the paper, are these two papers targeting different reading audiences?
Yes.
They certainly feel like to me that they should be targeting different reading audiences. One's far more magazine-y, right? And the other is far more academic literature. And in fact, even within the academic literature, it's probably targeting a health market, right? They're thinking the audience is going to be nurses and doctors and researchers, right? So they're very much in the health area. Whereas the other one is, oh, we might be a magazine that you'd pick up and read while stuck at the doctor's office, right? Or on a plane, right? So it's far more casual in its approach. So you can look at the writing styles and the design and the way it's presented as relating to both kind of the audience of the paper, of the intervention, but also the reading audience. Now, that change could mean that the second paper, the Time to Eat paper, did all the rigorous stuff, right? They could have done it very rigorously, but then just have a light, chatty mood on the way they write so that it feels lighter rather than getting heavy and being kind of, oh, we did this and this and this, and these are the numbers and numbers and formulas and numbers and formulas. I don't get the feeling that that's what's happened. I get the feeling that they were a bit loose and casual through their research, given their analysis doesn't seem particularly deep. Whereas the targeting parents paper, I think, was much more rigorous in its approach. Okay, so the parent app, targeting parents. Quick overview. So when I want you guys to present papers, I want you to present these, and that I want you to also think of the discussion. We're going to talk about GoRad at the end of the session. So, objective. We want parents to change their behavior regarding their children's eating, right? Because what they basically feel is that kids eat too much, and that's not just because the kids are bad kids, right? It's often because the parents just give them too much food, right? And I certainly know my father's an educational psychologist. He would spend most of his time fixing parents because most kids were fine, right? It's their parents who were screwing them up most of the time. So most of his counseling would actually be spending time teaching the parents how to actually be parents to kids. And so this targets the parents to say, well, you're just overfeeding your children, right? It's not their fault. And they put a lot of effort into behavioral change theory, right? So they try and work out how do we intervene to change behaviors. And they don't really care that much about the game aspect. It's there, right? It's an important thing, but they kind of gloss over it. That's also because of the kinds of people they're talking to. If you were writing this for a game journal, you would ramp up how gamey it was and how awesome the game bits were. If you're writing for a health journal, you ramp up how much health there is in it. Right? But it's still quite a lot of, game is one of the core 4 features they talk about. They talk about gamification. Right? Now, you could also look at these 2 papers, the Time to Eat, as the Time to Eat is a gamification of eating breakfast, right? And this is a gamification of being a good parent, right? So to some extent, they are gamifying different aspects of the interactions. They talked about these, so as the 4 features that were really critical for parents, having had lots of interviews, were the features of the app, so what it could do, that it would save time and be convenient, right? Because if it wasn't those, they wouldn't use it. That it looked nice, and that it had game elements. Right? Now, sometimes people would say the aesthetic is a part of a game, right? But we'll let them keep those separate. And features, you'd probably have game features as being something. But so those are the 4 areas that talked about. They gave some screenshots in the later material. If you went down and found, they actually gave lots of additional material. And so it's reasonably pretty. It's not kind of, as you see some of the papers when they publish screenshots, it is very much the kind of wireframe, boxy, minimalist, we're academics, we don't care what things look like kind of model. Well, this is kind of more smooth designed, actually looking nice. They go through and say, we're going to provide a new model, and it's not just that, but they use the COM-B model, whereas the first paper used the FOG, talked about the FOG model. In the COM-B, COM is capability, opportunity, and motivation leads to behavior. In the FOG model, its behavior is the result of motivation, ability, and a trigger. Right? For me, they look pretty similar. I mean, motivation is good. Capability versus ability. What's the difference in English between capability and ability? I'm not entirely sure as a native English speaker. Right? When I say, yes, that person has the capability of being me, that person has the ability to be me. Okay, I kind of mean the same thing to me. I think capability generally implies that they might not have done that yet, whereas ability is more agnostic to have you been that way in the past already.
Maybe not being aware of. So you're capable of doing something,
yes,
but
you're capable
you
of
haven't exercised that.
You might not know that you are capable of doing that.
Exactly.
Right?
Capable of killing a person.
Yes.
You don't say you're able to kill a person. Close, but
you got the opportunity, I feel.
Yeah, but it's quite a fine detail for saying, oh, we need this new model because this one doesn't work for us because ability and capability mean
different.
What? And the opportunity or a trigger, right? So FOG says, that there is a trigger, that's something that provides a moment when you can do things, an opportunity to do. Yeah, I didn't see it as being a radically different approach, right? So for me, and they don't actually mention FOG in this one, right? So one paper mentions FOG, the other paper mentions this COM-B. And this is how they talk about this behavioral change wheel in the paper, right? And you go and find the actual behavioral change wheel paper by these guys, Susan Michael. Yes, so that should actually Mish, Susan Nish, that's one is the link. But here is where they have their behavioral model. So they talk about capability, opportunity, and motivation. And within there, they talk about capabilities, there's physical and psychological capability. Within motivation, there's automatic and reflective, right? So they break down these. And opportunity is whether there is social opportunity or physical opportunity, right? So here, so they have physical twice, physical both in the capability and the opportunity, right? So you're physically able to do it, and you're also physically in a place that you can do it, right? So, and the idea is that these are the source of a behavior. These are the kinds of interventions you have, right? So as you see here, source, intervention, and these are policies or the things that you're doing to manipulate people. Okay, and so there's this idea that guidelines, and you can spin the wheel round. So you can have guidelines that are over here, and so these are all kind of, they're not. It's not that guidelines only create restrictions which only affect physical capability, right? It's not. They're not trying to link it that way. They're trying to say, well, this is kind of the wheel you can spin around and the interactions you can create. And so you have regulations, guidelines, and fiscal measures. So you can pay people or take money away from them and to try and modify their behaviors. Now these aren't just for health. This was for all behavioral change modification. And so that's their model of how you do this or how you think about it. And in terms of understanding, creating this kind of model means, okay, we've got a framework. We're trying to see how things react. We're trying to see how other interventions have worked. Like when someone intervened in this way, what did it affect? How effective was that? Did it have the change we're trying to have? Should we do that in a similar way? We'll take a break after this. So why do you think the evidence-based strategy? So you've got this, like you've got that big wheel, and people who used evidence-based stuff making apps, why do you think they weren't popular? What would you think might be the reason why evidence-based apps were less popular than kind of random designer intuition-based apps? What do you think people? Yeah.
I think it's a psychological thing. A healthy app or an app helps you to get healthy. It shows you that you have a problem with yourself or it's a problem with you. You play, for example, Candy Crush, it's something like, yeah, just want to spend some time. And if you start to app like this, you eat healthy, so somebody tells you, okay, you're doing something wrong, and it makes a bad feeling. It could make.
Yeah. So even within that area, so you're talking. Yeah, so that's the difference between just a casual game and a targeted game. They were saying that even within the games that were targeted for health, the games that went and had a bunch of theory behind them as to how they should change behavior were less successful than the games that were for health, doing the same thing but had no theory at all. But an interesting point, and where I was at a meeting last year when we were talking games of health, and we're talking about dementia sufferers, and we're talking about a game for dementia, and one of the women from Alzheimer's Europe was saying that no, you can't say that these people have a condition. You can't say they have dementia, because if you say you're targeting dementia, people who play the game will feel bad. Right? So you're not allowed to mention the disease, because that might stigmatize people and make them feel like they have dementia. Even if the reason they're playing it is because their doctors prescribed it for them because they have dementia. But you're not really allowed to say that because they'll feel bad. So there is a big issue around like accepting that you have a problem. Some people just don't want to do that at all, right? They'd rather not know. I find that really fascinating, that whole I'd rather not know than know and deal with it. So you get that whole, I don't want to take the test because I don't want to know if I've got cancer. It doesn't change whether you have cancer, right? You've got it or you haven't. The test won't change your state, right? But it changes the way you're thinking. And so some people don't want to know because, not knowing is better than knowing that they have cancer. Okay, so we'll take a break there and we'll come back and we'll keep talking about identifying the problem and the process the paper uses. Okay, so go take a break and we'll come back and we'll do some questions.
So I will keep the stream going, guys, behind the screen.
Are
Just
there
turn
any
the
people
mic
behind
off.
the
Yeah,
screen?
there is one person.
There's one person.
Yeah.
Other one. we'll get through the description and then we'll start discussing the quality of paper and the good and the bad, okay? Because you guys are, we're trying to teach you eventually to be masters, right? You know, like masters of the universe, right? You guys are going to have mastery. You're going to be amazingly good at stuff. And some of the space you're supposed to master is the ability to critique and analyze and understand and dissect and evaluate, right? So this ability to kind of pull things apart and be critical in interesting ways. And so, you know, we'll get through the description and then we'll start training you on some of that process. Okay, so my belief in this kind of area of why people who focus on the theory didn't necessarily produce very good apps is that they do focus on what traditional psychological theory tells them, and that is often based on tests and experiments done in labs and done on particular subgroups of the population, right? And if you focus heavily on that and ignore the aesthetics, right? Because often if you find, like, so I was reading last year, a paper saying that they didn't think apps were particularly good for losing weight, right? So there was another paper I was considering that I'd read last week on this. And they showed their app, because what they did is they built an app for losing weight, they gave it to kids, and the kids who got it didn't lose any more weight than the kids who got a pamphlet. And so they were saying this is a cautionary tale that apps don't necessarily help you lose weight. And when they showed screenshots of their app, it was awful, right? It was the default buttons for everything. Like you put in your weight, you had this scroll wheel that you had to roll to get to the weight to the right point, and it was just really ugly. And it was a digitization of their form that you fill in to report details to the doctor. So they made an app out of that and said, just use it every day. And, you know, it didn't motivate people. And they say, you know, but we know that if you monitor people, they change their behavior. The thing is that it's not always true, and you've got to know how you're monitoring them. And it's much deeper than just apply a simple theory, get the result you expect. So this paper, the Targeting Parents paper, did a lot of work in trying to work out what the problem was, right? So you see it's really heavy on working out a problem. And you think, okay, a bit like a story, there's going to be a payoff at some point, right? You're expecting that, you know, they're going to do all the setup and then they're going to tell you something amazing. I'm not sure if they ever get there, but they certainly do a lot of setup of thinking, okay, so we've got children's health, that's a big issue. Let's go and talk to some experts about what are the biggest problems. Let's see if there's a low-hanging fruit. What is one that we think we might be able to influence, right? That's something small and very targeted, right? So often when we talk to our master students, you guys come up with your master topic is, big, I'm going to change the world. And then we have to tell you, no, well, no, you're probably not going to change the world, right? You're going to have to narrow that down a bit to here, and then narrow it down to here, and then narrow it down to here, and then you do that.
I was crushed when my supervisor told me my master's is not going to change the world. I was like, what? Come on, what, are you crazy? I'm going to change
I'm going to change the world. So they do minimize the scope down from we're going to change kids' health to we're going to try and stop their parents giving them too much food. Right? You know, they might eat bad outside of home, and all the other things. What the parents give them, that might be whatever. But we're going to try and do one small thing. And they spend a lot of time saying how they engage experts and how they engage stakeholders, and having multiple meetings with parents and analyzing those interactions. So they had an expert panel and 5 parental panels, and they're trying to understand the behavior and why it's happening and what they're trying to do. So you get the stages of identifying the problem, identify what intervention you're going to do, they do a paper mock-up, and then they did some application development, and then they don't report anything else because they didn't get further than that. So it's kind of a, what would you hope to then see in a paper?
Results.
Results would be quite nice to see. Actually, you know, we used this app, what did it actually affect it had? So this is kind of a cut-off halfway paper, right?
There's probably paper 2 coming up.
Because these guys are playing a game, right? They're playing a meta game of the academic publishing game. Because they've got this paper, and they even explicitly say, oh, yeah, we've got a new model, but we're not going to tell you about it now, because that's in a future publication. And it's kind of, well, why didn't you just put it in one really good publication? But yeah, so they're salami slicing at this point, right? So what they've done is they've got this point and they've just cut it to say, oh, yeah, we'll cut it here. Not uncommon to do, right? You'll find this happening more and more as the game of academic publishing incentivizes this sort of behavior. Right? So we have certainly got a behavioral change model going on to academics as well. But okay, so they get there and they tell you how they do the process. They talk about having this model with the child in the center, and then they build a model of the things from talking with the stakeholders. And I'm thinking, well, I thought, when I first saw that, I thought, yeah, I could have done that without talking to anyone. Right? So would I need to talk to anyone to draw this? You put the person here. Their parents and siblings are close family, and then their relatives, grandparents, parents, friends, and children's friends are the next layer of interactions, and then everyone else fits it. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's a stunning research result. It's certainly a way you can draw your interactions, and the fact, yeah, you could argue that the interesting thing here is that they've drawn the children friends into the same area as their relatives and grandparents, right? But I don't think you necessarily need to have talked to a lot of people to work out that kids' friends probably are actually closer to a child than their grandparents, depending on the country you're in.
Yes.
Right? Depending culture in some cultures, the grandparents might actually be raising the child, right? And the grandparents might be very close. In fact, the grandparents may be the ones who are actually deciding what people eat in the household, right? Because they live in the grandmother's house.
Yeah.
She is the matriarch. She makes the decisions, and so the parents might actually have less influence on the child eating than the grandparents do, because the grandparents are there in some cultures. Whereas the child's friends will have no influence on what the child eats at all, because that's just not how that culture works. So this might be a very American culture where the grandparents have been pushed out to being in the same stage as the parents' friends or the children's friends. But that's a cultural diagram, right? And
Or UK.
Or UK, right? US, UK. It's that westernized culture. And I think.
Well, it's not uncommon, like in Poland, for the grandparents to stay with the kids and take them to school and so on when the parents work.
Yeah.
And then the grandparents actually, stay with the kids substantial amount of time.
Yeah. So if you're in Poland, if you're trying to target kids eating, you might target grandparents of kids, because they're the ones who spend lots of time.
Yeah, but the grandparents give kids all the sweets.
So in Poland, if there was a you would really want to target grandparents. Say, stop being grandparents.
Exactly.
Stop just giving them junk food all the time. Just stop punishing your children for having been bad children by making their grandchildren do it. But yeah, so schools, teachers, healthcare provision. So this is the example. So you've got these kind of diagrams that put out, which is okay and all, but I'm not sure if it's really.
It's not research based.
No, it's not necessarily contributing a lot.
They just want to scientifically prove it instead of just saying that, okay, this is the circle, we came up with this. It's better if you.
They try and make it look like it's scientifically derived, right? So they've kind of done look, this is what we discovered.
If you say you used an expert, then it must be true.
Yes, there is. You've got to watch out for that sort of thing. They do. So they have a list of how you target a behavior, right? And this is a fairly standard questioning list, right? So we talk about a lot of questions. So you can apply this list to any targeting of a behavior, and you can target for any game you make. You could use a very similar list of how you work out what you're aiming at. So if you do it targeting behavior, so who needs to do the behavior? What do they need to do differently than they are doing now? So who is doing it? What is the behavioral change you're having? When do they need to do the change? Where, in what context? Where are they doing that? How often do they need to do it? To whom or with whom are they doing it? Right? Are they doing behavior? And in what context do they need to do it? Right? So where is kind of linked to what context, but you can have more than just at work. You might have at work while giving a lecture. It might be different to while in my office. Right? So where, yeah. So context can also mean other things as well. But then this is fairly standard. Ask yourself those questions when you're making a serious game. And most serious games are trying to have a behavioral change in some way. Right? There are a group of serious games in the games for science where you're wanting people to use their time to discover things. You're not benefiting the individual at all. You are benefiting scientific discovery. So you're not trying to change that person in any way at all. Right? So there are some serious games that aren't personally changing. And sometimes those are called exploitation where you're getting someone to do a whole bunch of work for no personal benefit. At least games for health and games for education, the two that we're talking about, they both target the individual playing, and that individual gets some benefit, right? Rather than just trying to exploit them by games for work, where you make people play a game instead of coming to training because you don't want to have to pay them to do training, so you make them do it in their own time, right? That's a exploitation. It's like a company. So you ask a bunch of questions, and those are standard questions of just framing what you're trying to do. They then did a whole bunch of mapping. This is just the end of the table where they looks at how they had the behavior change techniques and what they were trying to affect. So you had the automatic motivation, it was emotion, persuasion, and they're using social support, blame out. So these were the individual aspects they put in their app, right? And this is the area they're targeting. So the area of motivation they're charging. So motivation, opportunity. And then type of opportunity. What context that was in, and what they were in the way in which they're trying to change it, whether they're trying to use persuasion or environmental restructuring or enabling. So this was their matrix of all of the things we put in their app. What are we trying to achieve with each of those things? Right? So they listed all the things that they're trying to achieve. Their gamification, points, badges, luckily no leaderboard, but very much on the points, non-specific reward, feedback on behavior, achievements, non-specific reward, feedback on behavior, progress bars, feedback on behavior. Didn't really think much about this list they made, but because they're not really thinking about like how do we make it really game-like, what they did is they just used, point achievements, badges. You can kind of look at those as being similar, right? So point badges, progress bars are useful certainly, independently of the others. And they did the quiz style, right? So they did Kahoot. Maybe it's a little harsh, but they had a wee quiz, right? It shows quiz are the games, therefore it's gamified. Right? Now, that's kind of a really surface level gamification. Right? It's not deeply ingrained in what you're trying to do, that you're making games out of this and you're giving, the things we talked about in the first lecture where I talked about agency and relatedness and competence and things. That's not really what they're talking about in here. Right? They're just talking about, surface structure, point badge leader will take the game out of it. So, gamification, is it a good gamification? It's kind of a surface. Yeah. Okay, so we'll get through this one and then we'll talk. So, the main objectives of time to eat. So we go into the other paper. Encouraging healthy behaviors, so it's very, very similar, but it was targeting the kids, and their objective was to try and understand the game mechanics that you can use to manipulate and change behavior, right? So because at the end of that paper, they talk about, we could use this to make them do more schoolwork, or so like we can use these game techniques to change anything they do. Healthy eating is just one of the things we're targeted now. They gave mobile phones to people, and they had a manual task for assessing food quality. And I, as a programmer, you read that and go, oh my God, that's never going to scale, right? That's just ridiculousness. They basically did a Tamagotchi, where you take your Tamagotchi. If you feed yourself, your Tamagotchi's healthy. If you don't feed yourself properly, the Tamagotchi gets sick. Right? They didn't really do much checking, because what the process is, you take a photograph of food, you send it in. Some researcher at the university looks at your picture and decides what feedback you should get and gives you a score. And that score determines on how healthy your dog goes. Yeah, I've never seen a dog go, yeah. Seems to be a matchup between a human kind of woo fist bump, movement, rather than actually what a dog would do when they're happy. But and so this score is determined by a researcher who looks at what you've eaten. Well, they look at the photograph you've taken. Right? You could have taken 3 or 4 photographs, one meal that you had that was healthy. Just photograph here, photograph here, photograph here, photograph here. Eat that, and I'll send the next one in tomorrow, and the next one in the day after, and the next one in the day after. And that way I've had 4 meals. Got all the points. They don't timestamp or do any security checks that the kids are actually playing the game properly. But they had this, and the Tamagotchis, you could pick a stapler. You read through the list of animals, right? They had a dragon, they had a potato, which I thought was a bit odd, but the apple, the worm, they had a dog, a penguin, a hippopotamus, and a stapler. And there's a robot and a stapler. So I think this is the robot, and that's the stapler. Okay, a stapler. I'm not sure a stapler is a sense. Okay.
Happy stapler is a good stapler.
Yeah, when my stapler's happy, that makes me feel good, and I feel sad when my stapler doesn't get to staple paper every day because somehow it's lost out. No, I'm not sure a stapler Tamagotchi is really an easy thing to understand. So they do some weird things. We extensively tested prototypes of the game with the target demographic before deployment. That was as much as they say of basically the design process. Yeah, we did a lot, don't worry. No, honestly. Yeah. So they don't say how much or with whom or what results they had from any of that prototyping, just chatty. Oh yeah, we did it. Yeah, don't worry about that. We did that, lots of that. So, they're very casual in dismissing what the other paper basically spends the entire 15 pages saying what this is, right? And these guys say it in a sentence. We're going to discuss whether that's a good or bad thing. These guys actually gave kids an app and measured what it did, right? So this is different to the other paper. The other paper talks about all the process getting to somewhere and then doesn't do it. This paper actually just basically says, oh yeah, whatever, we designed it, here's what happened. All right, so quite a different. But I was really horrified at some of their analysis. Right? So, for example, then they talk about did you feel connected? And was this effective? And the kid says, no, I didn't. The interview asked, did you eat breakfast? And the kid said, no, I didn't. You didn't eat breakfast. Do you feel like the name of the game they use changed the way you eat at all? A little. Right? So the interviewer is saying, didn't even change it a little bit. Kid goes, oh yeah, a little. A little? Yeah. What kind of change did it make? For the kid, I ate breakfast. So this sounds like a kid who is kind of just sitting there going, oh yeah, just go away. What do I need to tell you to make you go away? Right? I will say whatever you feel like, whatever I need to say to make you leave, I will say, right? So for me, it doesn't feel like a genuine kind of, this is the student really motivated. And even worse, in some cases, the student's attachment to their phone encouraged their attachment to the pet. That was their analysis of this conversation, which is, do you feel attached to the pet? Well, not attached. I am attached to the iPhone you gave me. And when you like and you like the pet because of the iPhone, they go well together. I'm going to be sad when I have to give it back.
The iPhone.
No mention of the pet. at all. Right? They don't. No. So their analysis that they became attached to the pet because they're attached to the phone. There's no evidence for that in here at all. Right? It is. They want that to be true, and then they have this other evidence, and they just go, "Oh yeah, we just want this to be true." So they go on, and at the end of the section, they say, "Oh, we could add all of these amazing features to this game to make it even better." Right? So they found they had small influence. Right? So they said that they went from like 20% to 50%. Yeah. So yes, we got kids to have breakfast. Right, so we increased the number of people who were having breakfast before they went to school. So success. Well, I mean, it's a change. How long lasting is that change? Do you think that permanently changed the kids' behavior?
Weren't they going for a checkup later, like 6 months after?
Yeah, we haven't seen that paper. Why might we not have seen that paper?
Well, they also say that they can also add some more features so that the game gets more interesting and the kids continue to play it.
So they talk about adding social features to it. Would social features... We certainly know that social is something that people are reaching out for. But social around healthy eating habits. Does that go well together? What are your thoughts? What challenges might you have if you start having to socially interact about being obese and having food control? Is that something people actively want to share as, oh, I'm fat and so I'm trying to eat less?
Yeah, but maybe they meant social features like you eat breakfast, you had 50 SMSs for free now.
Yeah, they could. If they gave you a reward of 50 free MSS, so you could be social having eaten properly.
They mentioned the fact to rate the other.
Rating each other's food. That feels awfully like it could become very bad very quickly, right? Because
You rate mine, I rate yours.
yeah, and then that's an awesome chocolate and vodka breakfast. Vodka for breakfast, that's a dick. Yes, it's balanced. He's got whiskey, vodka, and a beer. He's got a full range of food. So yeah, one self-rating, and also you've got bullying, right? Because you could have, if other people rating you, you can see what it is. No, you're shit. I'm just going to bully you and just going to downvote you. So anytime you open up, there is like a lot of risk, and particularly when it's about a sensitive issue like eating. Because there's research that shows that girls, if they eat at a table with people, they are far less likely to end up anorexic if you actually have a meal at a table, rather than all sitting at your couch or eating separately and eating at different times. If you normalize the process, it helps. So anytime you start intervening with health-related things, if you get it wrong, you can make people very, very sick, right? So it's a challenge. Do you think linking the healthy eating to pet health is a good idea? Having read the paper, do you think that...
I mean, for kids would work.
So you feel that the whole Tamagotchi approach for kids is...
I think so.
Is effective?
It will work for kids.
When might it fail?
But once the pet is gone, like now the iPhones are gone, so I don't think they will continue eating. Because they eat for the pet, not for themselves.
Yes,
Exactly.
Once you attach eating for the pet, when someone takes the pet away, or the pet dies, what do you do?
Stop eating.
Well, the only reason they ate healthy was that now it's gone. Oh, just eat the junk food now. I mean,
But that could influence their behavior, so they get used to that, so they continue to do it again.
Habit forming. So this is part of the argument, right? So the argument here is it habit forming, right? So if I repeatedly do something for a while, I get into the habit. So like putting your seatbelt on in the car, right? If you always put the seatbelt on, when you get into a car and you don't have a seatbelt on, you go, something's missing. Something's not quite right here, and you go, oh, okay, it's the seatbelt, because it's such a strong sensation. And you can argue that, you know, habit forming is useful, but people have to want to retain the habit for habit forming to actually stick, right? Because you can go through a process of doing habit forming, and as soon as you release somebody, they immediately slide back into what they were doing, right? And this is what you mostly find with weight control, right? People go on diets, they try and form a habit of eating well, and as soon as they come off the diet in any way, right? They have a single day where they go to a party and they eat some cake, and suddenly, bang, the whole diet's gone. They've gone back to even worse behavior than they were doing before, and they gain all the weight back, right? So in weight control, habit forming seems not to be particularly effective, right? As it was, diets would be effective, and we're almost, yeah, you can almost say that almost all diets are ineffective because that principle of habit forming just isn't the way weight management works, right? The body seems to want to rebound, so you've got the strong pull against that. And here, attaching your eating to an animal, which then, you know, you leave your phone behind and you go on holiday, do you eat well? Well, no, you're on holiday and you just eat whatever garbage, and when you get back, you remember to turn the phone on and go, oh yeah, now
The pet died.
The pet died. Fuck it, I'm not. So, you know, there are like, and people playing Tamagotchis. There were serious issues with kids having their Tamagotchis die. Right, this was emotionally painful for quite a few kids. So that was the end of so these questions. So what we now do, right, is we start digging in, because we've got 20 minutes, digging in to the qualities of these papers and what you thought of them. Okay, so and we start looking at what are good questions. So when we compare the two papers, the long paper, which some of you read, it spends a lot of time sounding very scientific. Right? Was it presenting well-researched evidence? Or was it presenting their ideas in a scientific way? The second. So did you get, because Runa was very much of the, but where's the theory? Right. So the first paper, the targeting parent paper, written in the appropriate scientific model, yeah? Right? You read the headings, right? It seems, you know, introduction, background.
IMRAD style.
It's the IMRAD, right? It's the, you know, research methodology. So you have the introduction, you have your methodologies, you have your results, and you have your discussions. So, you know, it's all nicely formatted like a scientific paper. They've got lots of numbers in there. So when we go to lots of steps, they tell you through their steps. And not the Kahoot, but if we go to this one up, we have to go to, where have I got it up here? Here, but not on that screen. There. If we look at, so yeah, so they've got lots of, it's a good long paper, and you know, in here they've got tables and they've got numbers, like they do, there are their inserts for gamification. But when they're talking about the numbers, and I'm trying to get to the right place, where is it? Here. So say, when they're doing this, you know, they're talking about, you know, so 2 were recruited from local, so there's 8 patients is thinking of mothers, 87%, and fathers, percentages, and the percentages, you know, they're reporting overwhelming phone use, so 58% had an Android, 27% iPhone, BlackBerry, and there was even one Windows phone. So yeah, so they report in the right kind of way to feel sciencey, right? And they certainly have enough references so to other people's work, right? So they're, you know, the question due on models of usability and user experience goals, right? So they're citing appropriately in their research, right? So they're doing lots of citing, they're reporting the things, they were quite thorough about their process, but yeah, the game and the app they actually made, that feeling of like the game stuff felt tacked on, right? Because it kind of came at the end when they talked to the software developer, And they talk about that when they talk about like connecting with software engineer, right? When they talk about software engineer, and then the software engineer came back with game stuff, and they kind of tacked that in. Now, their behavioral change stuff, they're not really using games as any kind of behavioral change. They're just saying, oh, you know, that's just in the motivating people to use it thing. And yet they talk about motivation as one of the big 3 things in behavioral change. And they say the games are the way to motivate things, then they don't connect the two.
Yeah, they talk about motivation and engagement. And that on the engagement side, they also lack that.
They just kind of don't connect that bits of games with what they're doing. And if you think of games as being strongly motivating, right? And that's why the software engineer said, you know, basically, I can guarantee you the conversation went down the, oh, can you build us this app? And the software engineer looked at me and went, yeah, but no one will use it. I can hear them saying, well, we can do it, but you know, no one will use it. You need to kind of add some stuff that actually makes it interesting and a bit fun, because that's what people want on mobile phones. And so, what do we do? Games, okay? Well, you guys can add games. Oh yeah, we can gamify. So they did the most casual gamification of it that they could, basically. But they kind of present all this really nicely presented, scientifically dressed article. Right? But when you take its clothes off and look at what it actually achieved, what does this paper actually achieve? We don't really know yet, right? And even like they don't compare the app they made with the other ones that are in the market, right? They say, you know, all those other ones, lots of people don't like the theory-based ones. They then compare their theory-based ones with those others to say, why is our theory-based one different to those theory-based ones? Even if they didn't trial their app yet, they at least had it, so they could have analyzed it. Okay? And when I say salami slicing, it's the bit model. I'll try and find it. BIT model. Is it that? Okay. Yes. Since conducting this study, a new framework, behavioral intervention technology model, has been published, which attempts to integrate both conceptual and theoretical framework for e-health and e-health. Intellectually offers a method of targeting distal clinical aims, so weight reduction. So they say, you know, we have this other model now. However, in contrast to the things, furthermore, the BIT model does not integrate user-centered design, a crucial step that was followed in our work ensuring the social validity of that amongst the target population. So they say, you know, there's a new model we've worked on, we've published, but this is a separate study. Okay? So it's kind of, they knew about this model when they were writing this bit, right? Now, if this model is better than the one they've just used and written, why didn't they just ditch this paper and use the better model? Right? This bit, to me, feels like what happens when you submit a paper. It gets rejected. You've been doing work, while it's in the publication process, you've been doing more work. You've come up with a new model. You published that. It's got published. You got this one come back. And you add a bit on the end, and you resubmit it somewhere else. Right? Because now you've done this additional work, but you don't want to rewrite this paper because, you know, you've already written the paper. And it's close to submittable because it just got rejected on, like, with some revisions. So you did the revisions, and now you got the new model, so you just mention the end and then throw it back in. Right? So this is, yeah, I would almost prefer them not to have put this bit in, because it makes it sound like, oh, we've got a new model, we just couldn't be bothered applying it. Right? Which makes me even kind of more kind of, did all the right things, and then you just said, oh, we couldn't be bothered. They tried to explain it here by saying this new better model doesn't have user-centered design in it. But it's kind of, well, yes, you could have used this one if you think it's better. With this to say, look, we've extended on this new theory. Right? So I find that's, for me, that's a bit kind of telling of someone who's kind of multiply submitted and has kind of not been willing to rewrite what they've already written. Right? So I find, yeah, so that's a challenge. They talk about their limitations, and I think this one is particularly true. So firstly, the time taken to develop a prototype app is an important consideration. In fact, it's almost important. And I think compared to intervention development, the associated technology development costs and development occurs at a much faster pace. Basically saying, because this takes 1.5 years to go through their process, by that point, other people have come out with games, fixed the game, made version 2, already got an audience, have been having interventions, got money coming in, and you're just about to release. Right? Time is a problem, right? And that's a serious consideration. How do you manage that, right, in these processes? So, in terms of questions, what do you think would be a good question to ask this paper? What would be a telling question? What were your actual results? That would be a fair. So a question here is, what were the actual results of the paper? Contributions. What is the real contribution of this paper? Right? That would be a good question to ask, because it would make someone who is defending this paper, right? So if I set you guys up, one person saying, right, I'm going to defend this paper as being a good paper that's a good contribution. And I set someone up to challenge it and say, no, you've not done anything useful. Right? So what is your actual contribution? And then the defender might say, well, it contributes a clear process for how you develop an app, right? Following methodologies, right? And following current theory around behavioral change. And the other person would say, do you have any evidence that those theories are effective and actually a good match with how you change behavior? And then you have to say, well, we are citing other researchers who are doing that work, right? So the right response here is actually say, that's why we're using state-of-the-art behavioral theory from other researchers who are doing that background work to ensure that their models match reality. We are building upon their models and trying it in this environment, right? Which is why you cite people, so you can blame them if you're wrong, right? Because you don't want to take, you don't want to take credit or blame for everything you write, right? So if someone else has written it, you give them credit for it. But if that thing is wrong, you get to deflect blame onto them, saying, well, I cited them, and if they've lied, I was just took them at they said it was true. So citation does give you two things you can do. One is to defend yourself, and one is to actually be good and give credit.
We talked about repeatability yesterday, and the stance is that if you cited someone without making sure it was correct, you take the blame as well.
You see, that's a tricky one, right? Because science doesn't really work. It should work that way. Exactly. It should work that way, but it generally doesn't. So what is your actual contribution for this paper? In the puppy dog paper, in the time to eat paper, what would be a good critical question?
Would it really change the behavior of kids?
Does it have a long-term effect, right? Will it really change behavior? Now, interesting. Okay, so improving quality of question. So the question you asked is, does it really change behavior, right? That's not specific enough a question, right? Because I could take that and say, yes, it certainly does. At the time, while they've got the phone and I'm watching. But you didn't say, so in your question, you didn't specify tightly enough what you were asking, right? Which is why I rephrased it as, does it have long-term effect on their behavior? And I could still answer, yes, it certainly does. They don't eat breakfast as much after playing our game. It's a long-term effect, the negative one, because you didn't ask, does it have a long-term positive effect on children's eating, right? So when you ask a question, you have to think, okay, like what bits do I need to actually include so I get the answer that I'm looking for, right? So you could say, yes, it definitely has a long-term effect. So you need, yeah. So when I talk about improving the quality of the questions you guys ask, it's about adding those things. And we do this for your master's thesis research question, right? You have to kind of, that's why some of them get quite long, because they have to specify what they mean. They have to make it measurable, right? They have to be meaningful in some way. So yeah, so does it have a long-term positive effect on children's eating behavior? That would be a, and they answer, now is that answerable from that paper? No, it doesn't say. So here we go to the interview. Yes, that's a really interesting question. It's the one they probably they need to answer before you'd actually want to use the system. But it's not one that's in the paper. Right? Now, from a researcher point of view, we have these different qualities of questions. Right? That's a good quality question. It would lead what you then do. Right? It would lead you to what do we now have to do in this area? We have to prove that it has long-term positive effect. Right? It doesn't, whereas the one we asked here, what is your actual contribution for this paper, is something this paper could answer, right? The people writing this paper could answer saying, well, we have, this is what our contribution is. Whereas the other one is, we don't know that yet. so they're kind of different approaches of questions. One is what leads us forward, and the other is explain yourself kind of questions. Right? Now, we're interested in both. Now, we've got the GoRad system, and we can kind of show you what that looks like, because don't worry, I have this room. Do you guys have to go somewhere immediately? Do you have another class immediately? No, I can make my third year. So I've only got like 5 of them in the class, so they can wait a little. But we'll show you the GoRad system. Do I actually?
So it's bit.ly/GoRad.
Okay.
Yeah.
bit.ly/GoRad. I'll move that onto the main screen. So bit.ly. Right, so bit.ly.GoRad. GoRad! If we're a school with RAD. I still think it would have been funny if the Norwegian University of Science and Technology had been the new Norwegian University of Technology and Science. Because in English, technology and science is easier to say science and technology.
Do you know why it's done?
Because if you
would be...
yes, if you abbreviate the Norwegian University of Technology and Science, you get Norwegian University of Technology and Science, NUTS.
Well, nuts.
Nuts. So the only reason I remember the English name for NTNU is that I say it's not nuts. It's nuts, and then I switch the two to make it not nuts. Yes. Yeah. Okay, so this is our GoRad system, the game of reading and discussion.
Do you remember your login?
Yes, I do. Okay. Well, I can try. I logged in recently, so.
You should remember your credentials.
Come on. I picked.
Network is in.
What's
The
happening?
wireless network is running, or?
You have network? Yeah, you have,
Oh.
because you uploaded it.
But my network just dropped, just then.
This room you should have cable.
Edge room, connect.
I don't think.
Edge room doesn't like it, but yeah, now it's connected.
It's just
Where am I? Mouse pointer. I can't find my mouse pointer.
it's now down. Yes.
Ah, there we go. Come on, log in. Open a new tab. Okay, so you guys can register if you haven't registered already.
So go delete the login. Go there again. Oh, just refresh the previous page.
This one.
Yeah. So refresh it.
Weird.
My interest is in Angular.
Yeah.
It could be because if you're using HTML5 routing, then it actually tries to request a resource named
That's right.
login.
Yeah, so you have to delete the login out of the resource. Yeah, so delete the, from the URL, delete the last part and refresh, like press enter after that. Yeah.
Yay, Angular.
And then press login. Yes, and
right.
then, yep, you should be fine.
Login. Yes, you remove them. You're welcome, Simon McKellum.
And then you go to articles.
And then, so I'm in, and I go up here to articles.
And we are at week 3.
And down here,
so you hide week 2.
I can hide week 2.
Yeah. And then, yeah, we have the.
So
we had 3 papers.
Yep.
Now we have 4.
Yep.
Because so it's time to eat is the one which we just discussed.
Yep. So it's time to eat. So this one, the Follock, it's time to eat. We entered this basically a wee thing where we add an article, we say which week it's in, and then here were the questions that had been asked by students last year about that paper.
Yeah.
So so these kind of questions. In this study, iPhones were given to 53 kids with the time to eat application installed. What possible issue does this raise for the study? Right. So this was a question on, the fact you're giving them iPhones. What does that mean about the results of your study? And it's, that you're giving them iPhones might have a massive influence on their kind of their desire to contribute and their desire to be involved. You've got this massive reward that you're going to take away if they don't do what you tell them to. Because even if you say, oh no, we're not going to take the phone off you if you don't participate. There's the implication, right? In their mind, you gave me a phone and told me to do this. And if I don't do that, you're probably going to take the phone away. This is considered normal. So is the motivator that there's a game on it, or is the motivator the massively cool tech you just gave them? So we have these questions.
And the study, as a reminder, was done in 2009, 2010, which means the iPhone at that time was sort of really the coolest tech ever, right? So not as popular as it is now. So. Yeah. Yeah.
So it would be, you'd have to be given, if I gave a bunch of 10-year-olds Oculus Rifts and said, right, we're going to do an Oculus Rift study, and you're going to have an Oculus Rift at home pre-installed with a whole bunch of games in it, and you're going to play this health game in the Oculus Rift, I think the kids would be quite enthusiastic to participate in that study, and they probably would play my health game for some of the time they had.
Let us continue with the study.
Yes, it's awesome. Also, I love the app. Just I want to keep the Oculus. Okay. You're gonna have problems. So these were a list of questions, and you could add a question here. We have.
So I've added the Curtis paper at the bottom,
and then here we've added the Curtis paper. And there's an example question, right? So what we want you guys to do is to go through that process for the following weeks. We're going to have papers, and we want you to try asking questions. Now, you haven't got the rating up.
The rating is, but if you scroll all the way down.
Yeah, all the way down, there's the rating on
there was some weeks where, you see the ratings here, for example.
Okay, so we're going to clean this up and archive the material, right? And you guys have to choose what topics you're going to do so we can decide the papers. Yeah. We've got lectures next Tuesday is the next one. So we're going to have to decide with you guys who's going to do which paper. And here you can score the questions. And this is where we kind of make a game out of this. Right? Is that you can go in here and you can give different scores to the different questions.
So you know which question Simon asked. Question Q3. He cannot score his own question.
Yes, your own question. So I now know which question, but you guys won't know which question, who asked which question.
No.
Right? So we will put our own questions in, and you guys can give us points. Right? Now we hadn't worked out. Now, so from a gamification point of view, right, you guys are involved in this course. Should you get points if you pick our questions? Because currently we're thinking that you get points as a student. We give you points. When people pick yours as a good question, we'll give you course level points and saying, yes, you get more points for the high score list, and you know, so that's good. You asked a good question. Should you get bonus points for when you give us as lecturers good marks?
Who said that you have the best question?
Aha, yes, good, good pick. That would imply that the questions we ask are always good questions, which might not always be true.
That wasn't true last time.
No, and if we're gaming it, then yeah. So basically, because if I gave you points for picking our answers, it would be the idea that our answers were, or questions rather, in some were the right ones. Those are the ones you should pick, right? So although I could have that game mechanic, if I gave you points for picking out, you wouldn't necessarily be thinking what are the best questions. You'd be thinking, okay, can I work out the way Simon writes so I can give him points so I can get points, right? And you know, then they make Simon feel better because you know lots of people pick my question as the best question. Yeah, that's because not because they thought it was the best question, just because they're trying to game the system, right?
Yeah.
So when you look at how you give players points, you've got to look at those additional consequences and what assumptions are you making about the questions. But we'd like to try this, right, and see if we can give you guys feedback on why you got good points, right, and look at who's asking the best questions. Right? It's kind of again, it's the opposite of Kahoot, right? In Kahoot, we score you for answering the questions I have. In this, we score you for asking good questions. Right? So it's kind of the opposite direction. So we're going to clean this up. We now have, and as I had said, I wanted to know by Friday. That's when I thought this lecture was on Friday. Have you gone into Fronter and had a look at the topics to pick from? I know young Gregor has already emailed me saying he wants to do propaganda games. Okay. Do you guys have a good idea of what you want to do for your specialist topic area? Have you had a look at that list? Okay, so I will take you through the front page. Sorry, I'll just be a few more minutes, the GPU guy who tuned up. And we're going to move GPU and this, so yeah. But so if we go to Fronter, I hate Fronter in so many ways. And now it's at learning anyway, but yeah. So, I think going through the tendering process and then like it's learning buying Fronter when the reason that it's learning complained about NTU going with Fronter last time was that, you know, yeah. So I think it's, see, this isn't useful. One of these, yay, internet, you're fantastic.
Yeah, you know, bring a cable.
Nope, bring a cable, and but then I had to also bring my adapter because I don't have it.
Yeah, that's what I had to do. Yes.
Yeah. I need more than a cable. I need an adapter, the USB adapter, because this doesn't have an Ethernet cable. It's supposedly reconnected now, so.
Yeah, I tried to record Rune in the last lecture. It was exactly the same. I had like internet for 30 seconds and then 30 seconds no internet.
Yeah.
And then internet again for a while and then no internet.
And it appears that I
new building.
Yeah.
With all the wireless networks.
But I learned my lesson.
Does that mean it's got all new problems? Aha, right. Oh, and I clicked the wrong one. I clicked the wrong.
Don't click the wrong ones.
Because it doesn't. It goes 4, 2, 3, 6, 4, 4. What the hell? You can't even move them around. But yeah. Okay. So in here, there's the bit.ly to go right. So that's where you'll find papers, and that's where we'll do the questioning. You find down here. Where did I put the link to previous? Oh, where did I put it? That's presentation topics, proposed topics. Okay, so in here we had a list of proposed topics. Hopefully it's still there. Yes. Now, Fronter has the absolute terrible, like 3 clicks to edit system. You guys have noticed that? So over here, I go edit. And then that allows me to
Or not.
To choose what to edit, and then yeah, maybe we shouldn't play with internet too much.
Okay, so so yeah, so you have to there we go. Edit. It then allows me to choose edit. So I have to click edit to then let me click edit, and then you can click edit, and then you have to click where you're gonna edit. So yeah, and then when you save, you actually have to kind of save it multiple at the multiple resolution. You have to actually click save here, or nothing happens, right? So so you guys can go in here and edit these, but I've locked this now, so none of you can edit. So in here, propaganda games.
Jan Gregor.
Gregor has, I'll leave his name capitalized. Jan Gregor has decided he'd be interested in this. Now, if you're also interested in propaganda games, you can add your name at the end here, right? Because 2 or 3 people, if we're going to have debates, that's quite useful, right? So these are the kind of areas I would like you to look at these. If you haven't by tomorrow night, I will allocate you an area.
And we should choose papers also, or?
So I've got some starting papers and ones that were from last year people had picked, right? I haven't put a past starting paper in one people haven't picked because no one picked it, so there was no point in me hunting down a good paper for you to start with. If you pick an area, I will give you one, but I'd like you to go and look and find an interesting one yourself, right? As well, right? So, and then we can kind of decide which one will actually cover, right? So I want to look at these, and if there is a new one, a new area that I haven't listed here that you say, hey, games for climate change, have I got climate change in there? No, probably not. There might be games for climate change. You could analyze coal carbon taxes as a game to modify
there are some,
behavior. So there are, but so you could, so if I've not listed it here and this is what really fascinates you, then you can add a row to the table and add in your name and the top area. Right? That doesn't guarantee I'll give you that. It just means that you're at it. Yeah.
Just a question.
Yep.
I mean, games for health and games for education, we cover them, but there are probably more issues to deal with as well.
Those are broad topics.
Want to go into depth on those today?
So here, so this was the games for diet and weight loss. So yes, you can also pick sub areas of games for education. You can look at games training. So here's games for brain training. So I'm happy for you also to pick out a particular area. Maybe you want to do games.
But it needs to be a bit more specific and narrow.
Yeah. So not games for health. You have to pick something a lot tighter than that, right? Because otherwise you've got far too much to read. Okay. So by tomorrow night, I want you to have done that. Otherwise, I will allocate you stuff and allocate who's talking tomorrow night. I'll go through, work out who's talking on the Tuesday, and tell you what papers you're presenting.
Should the students propose the papers, or should we propose the papers?
My plan is I will propose one per area, and the students should propose one as well.
Yeah.
Right?
We should send you an email by tomorrow night, or?
You can edit this directly. Right? Not at the moment you can't, because if I save this now, right? So I'll show you younger who wants to go there. I'll save it, and
don't click on the block.
Don't ever click on that, because that means I've changed it. No one else can change this now.
We had that last year. One student clicked that, and then nobody could edit the table.
So these were examples of suggested papers in those areas. What I'll do is if people start picking things, I'll start adding areas in those papers in those areas, so you can see them here.
Yeah.
And then I have to unclick edit, I think, and then it actually releases it.
That's
you
right.
guys. So if you're on there, you should be able to now.
Yes, I tried that.
And you could add your name to someone?
No.
You know? Oh, you don't know what you're doing yet.
Yes.
Okay. So add your names in here. We'll use that. And I'll use that by tomorrow night. If your name's not on there and you're enrolled in the class, I'll give you a topic. All right? So it's probably worth deciding, because otherwise you might get something you really are not interested in. Okay? And then we'll release that, and we'll start cleaning up GoRad. So we'll have those questions. Hopefully, therefore, you can spend Monday reading papers and asking questions.
Yep.
Okay.
So for the mobile research, deadline is tomorrow as well. So you have to pick the area.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for Tuesday, one student has to present a topic, and we will choose who.
Yeah.
And one or two will argue.
My thought is actually, if I can, I'd like to get 2 students to present in the same area. And the original design I had in my head is that we'll have 2 papers, right? And one will be pro and one will be opposed, and then you'll swap for the next one, right? So I want 2 students to be presenting, and so we'll present 2 papers, and we'll have that discussion, and we'll have these questions as leading questions that allow people to debate, right? Because if you have good questions, then we can use those, and the person pro can pick out the good pro questions and kind of answer those, say yes, it's like this, and the person who's opposed can say, well, no, you missed that bit, and you know, have a debate around it. Right?
So we make the questions after the student presents the paper?
No, the questions that before.
The questions should go up
for the discussion.
The discussion, right? So the idea is that you read the paper, you come up independently with your question, and you write it up here, right?
Before the lecture.
Before the lecture, right? And then ideally, we'd like to get to the stage where you can also vote before the lecture. So we can rank the questions before they come to the lecture. Otherwise, we can rank them as the first thing we do in the lecture.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but it's the idea that you should kind of independently come up with some questions, and then when you come together and are sitting around here, we should be debating your questions that you have, right? So that you're actually maximizing the benefit of your physical bodies being in the same room with each other, right? Because if I just want you to read stuff, coming here and having all your physical bodies in this room while you sit there reading stuff, I mean, you know, there are probably more comfortable places you could be to read research articles, yeah? You know, with a beer, sitting down, you know, nice warm fireplace. I have been given permission to hold lectures in student Husit in the evening with beer. So if you want one of our lectures to be in student Husit and you guys all can be drinking beer while we debate this stuff, I'm also happy to have one of the lectures over there. I asked the rector and he said, that's fine. I'm not allowed to drink and I'm not allowed to buy you beer. Right? So there are some rules. Right? So as long as I'm not drinking or I'm not supplying you with alcohol, we're all good. Okay? So if you want, we can. Would people mind doing an evening student Husit? So you think it's okay to do that? Okay. You can email me if you have an objection. Right? Because, you know, I know people want to hear, I will not go to the pub. It's not necessarily something someone wants to say in class. But if someone wants to privately object, I'm quite happy to receive a private email saying, Simon, really? Not at all. Okay, so, yeah. But if not, I'll try and organize something where we can go and have a kind of, you know, a different kind of session in a bar in student Husit, and then, you know, have a discussion in that different environment, right? Because sometimes the environment you're in shapes the discussion you have, right? And this is very much a classroom environment. So you guys are very much in the still classroom mold.
Let's not call it session, so you can drink also. So we can just
right. If it's just we're just having a, you know, we're just going and having a drink, a forum. We're having a forum. It's not a lecture. It's just a forum. So I can do. I don't mind. You want to drink me under the table? You maybe I do have to bring the drinking checkers and we go shot for shot. Yeah, well, maybe that's an interesting game. But I do have some interesting board games and card games that I think it would be really interesting for you guys to play. Some odd, unusual game mechanics. So maybe we do need to have a session up at Student Husit, whereas a board gaming and we just get to play some games and discuss
I think we
things.
should do that. Yeah.
Like Cards Against Humanity, and that sort of thing. So yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you very much. Sorry for taking an extra 20 minutes of your time.
There was one person per